So far in my excavation of Isekai, I've learned quite a bit about the roots of this genre, clarified its core elements and themes before digging back in its chronology to see its evolution. Also, I did say I could wring out at least one more intro from this metaphor, so at least I'm not a liar. I'm reluctantly pleased to say that I'm starting to see the appeal here. But that's what makes this so sad, as I know there's an inversion coming soon, where that satisfaction becomes a slog. So follow me along as I piece together this isekai puzzle, find out what makes it popular, why the trend grows so much like a hydra where every head cut off sprouts two more in its wake, and maybe come to terms with its prevalence in the medium. I'd rather not say I hate isekai without understanding it, which I guess makes this my therapy. And today's subject is what I'd consider the moment when isekai went from a quirky subgenre to a full-blown infection. Not so much a cause, but a symptom that stands out as a landmark in history. One where the gold rush was assuredly on, with shows like Konosuba and Re:Zero blowing sales expectations out of the water. Any animation studio was snatching these series up for a quick adaptation to ensure successful profit. Which is how we end up with something like Isekai wa smartphone to Tomo ni, or In Another World with My Smartphone. Looks like we're back in familiar territory. You know what that means. A web novel starting way back in 2013 on the popular publishing platform Shosetsuka ni Naro, a Japanese website for user-generated content. That is to say, people posting their works themselves. I haven't really mentioned where the works were originally published so far, as it hasn't really made much of a difference or been relevant to date. The only two I've covered thus far that started there were Re:Zero and Konosuba. This is the typical hunting ground for publishers as they look for series that are trending well. And with that, Hobby Japan nabbed this series in 2015 for a light novel adaptation actually done by the original writer. If you want to know why writing a popular series on this website is such a big deal, it's because it can very well lead to a physical published series. And maybe the next big thing in anime, changing your very life. Pleasing readers to build a fanbase for your story is a high priority. Which is why I say these already otaku writers are heavily influenced by their otaku fanbase, shaping the story by cliché because that's what people want to read. By summer 2017, the anime was pushed out the door by, at the time, Reed Productions, now Ashi Productions, a studio mostly known for magical girl shows. That's over a year since Re:Zero and Konosuba demonstrated how popular these web novel isekai properties could be in the anime sphere. But that begs the question, why this series? Well, with a sizable initial fanbase having over 100 million views by 2017 when the anime was launched, that was some juicy bait. And the anime, despite not having the best reviews, still managed to meet a modicum of popularity among viewers. Alright, so, In Another World with My Smartphone. You know that stereotypical isekai premise of a dude accidentally killed by a god and has an apology getting sent to another world with some piece of technology that's meant to make him OP as hell? Basically whatever generic ideas that crop up in your head when imagining isekai as a concept, this series plays those straight and practically verbatim. So let's get through those cliches. The obvious one is the dude dying / being taken there by a god. His accidental death results in his resurrection in another world. Oddly not raising much of a fuss because those are the rules and it would be bloody inconsiderate to protest about decorum. Also, he's just happy to be alive again. And while most isekai protagonists at least show some sort of remorse for leaving their old lives behind, this guy's pretty nonchalant about the whole thing. So the god sends him off with his smartphone as support in this, say it with me now, medieval level society. Would it be anything else? I hate to keep bringing it up, but I feel there's only so many ways you can reshuffle a generic fantasy setting before the wells run dry. We've got magic, horse-drawn carriages, merchants amazed by his typical Japanese high school uniform, an adventures guild, and it glosses over the less appealing aspects such a society would have like sanitation, boredom, and crushing poverty. In modern isekai, this is obligatory. Every show seems to have these aspects, and by 2017, when this one was released, it was already well worn. And you know he's absolutely broken. The god, shown in flashback a few minutes into the first episode, and maybe a few hours after it would have actually happened in universe, bestowed him with powered up speed, strength, reflexes, and other basic stuff to ensure he'd survive there easily. Hell, he brings down monsters without breaking a sweat and learns magic quickly too. To the point he's actually amazing at all aspects of it. Not to mention his access to the internet still allows him to look things up in our world and easily bring them to theirs. The dude could, with enough time, build a modern society if he really wanted to. I think we've got the OP part nailed down. With this type of power and how quickly he amasses a harem of cute girls, fixing various problems for people in important places and building a reputation, it fits that whole coming to that world and making it revolve around him criteria I judge these off of. Though for a harem show, its fan service is quite tame, at least compared to what I've seen thus far. So I guess, why am I talking about this show? All the points I've brought up so far have been pretty standard to most isekais we've looked at to this point. I think for me, what sort of drains the emotional investment I've had in other series I've watched compared to this one, is the main character's a block of wood at the start, doesn't really care about his situation, and is just given everything, whereas characters like Kazuma and Subaru faced adversity in their new settings, where any iota of an advantage was carved out, earned, or had drawbacks. Hell, even in Gate and No Game, No Life, the protagonists struggled to put their lives on the line at the expense of societal pressures and such. This whole "you're just powerful naturally" streamlines the process at the expense of character development, and is probably why Isekai has such a bad reputation these days. It's why I feel this series is important to talk about, as I feel it's one of those landmarks where Isekai switched from being a story premise into a genre of its own with its own tropes, beats, and themes. While outside observers might find these points grating, I think it's more a barrier for entry than intentionally bad writing. To consumers of this media, it's less important how, and more that it happens. And preferably as soon as possible, so the true adventure can actually begin. If that makes sense. By 2017, Isekai in anime wasn't that old. Most of the popular shows for it only came out about a year before. But in the web novel scene, where there are hundreds of these being written around the same time, taking inspiration from one another since around 2012 in some sort of kudzu wanktangle, we may need to accept that this was already well defined by its core audience, well before it broke into mainstream success. And this feels more like a series written by committee than one written by an author with a story, steeped in its cliches so heavily that little originality remains. Hell, the sheer amount of borrowed from or referenced Konosuba speaks to that. I mean, besides from its painfully 90s feeling opening with little substance besides, "these are the girls in this show that you'll want to drool over," to its plain shiny art, flat shot composition, and plot on fast forward, it feels by the numbers. This particular show seemed to be at that turning point where Isekai became a punchline, where people stopped saying, "Hey, have you seen this new thing?" and went with, "Yeah, this is another isekai." The tropes I discussed at length in these videos were already arranged neatly into a formula, and with the wider market anime brings, it was clear that the genre was out of ideas already, leading to many of these being lambasted as generic, mindless trash by reviewers. But that's from the critical perspective. Isekai persists to this day, stronger than it's ever been. It's almost as though the opinion of the snobbish vocal minority doesn't reflect that of the capital having masses. Look, I don't fault people for liking Isekai, nor do I think it's ruining anime. Going through this video series, I've actually changed my opinion quite a bit on these type of shows. For one, I don't view them as a type of show anymore. Isekai is a genre in of itself, like shonen. It has its own cliches that people who are fans of it expect and like. It's not for everyone, but that doesn't mean there aren't some worth watching, even if ones like this are a dime a dozen now. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and do all that other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching.